You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You're listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. You may find all your sales and rental equipment needs at McAllister.com. We are pleased to announce our podcast is now a member of the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guests today are former chairman of the Indiana Republican Party, Murray Clark, former chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party, Kip Tew, and political and State House reporter emeritus. Is that a fair title?
I'll take it.
Jim Shella. It's so great to have all of you on the podcast. Look forward to a discussion. Yeah. As way of background, Murray served as an Indiana state senator for 11 years, representing portions of Marion and Hamilton County. He was a candidate for lieutenant governor in 2000 and served as chairman of Mitch Daniels' successful campaign for Indiana governor in 2004. He also served as chairman of the Indiana Republican Party from 2006 to 2010. Including serving as my boss from 2006 to 2007, during which he left my office shaking his head more than once, only made happy by these cashews and M&Ms that I had there. Through Murray's leadership, the state Republican Party retained the governor's office, won a majority in the Indiana General Assembly, and recaptured a United States Senate seat in 2010. And by way of transition, we should also note that Murray's maternal grandfather served as chairman of the Democratic National Committee under President Harry Truman.
Correct.
In the early 1950s. Right. He was forced out by Adlai Stevenson, who then got slaughtered by Dwight Eisenhower twice. Kip Tew is a former chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party and the Marion County Democratic Party. Are you the only one who's had that distinction?
John Livengood had it.
He's been an advisor in several statewide campaigns, including campaigns for Secretary of State in the United States Senate. In addition, he served as deputy campaign manager for Governor Joe Kernan in 2004. Kip also served on the campaign staff of Indiana Governor Frank O'Bannon and was a member of the Indianapolis City County Council. He is most famous, well, he's famous for a lot of reasons. But he was state chair of the Barack Obama presidential campaign in Indiana and authored an account of that historic effort titled Journey to Blue, How Barack Obama Won Indiana in 2008. And last but not least, Jim Shella was Wish TV's State House reporter for more than 30 years, during which time he also served as host of the political roundtable show Indiana Week in Review. Did you do that show, Murray?
Murray was semi-regular on that show.
Kipper V?
Jim had me on once to help promote my book.
Like Johnny Carson. Since his retirement from both these duties, he has been promoted to political co-host of the Leaders and Legends podcast. Thank you all again for being here. Before I turn the show over to Jim, I wanted to ask each of you, this is kind of, we don't do big P politics. We do fun, small P politics on the podcast. So I want to ask Murray to start. What was your first political memory?
Well, other than the lively discussions at Thanksgiving and Christmas, you mentioned my grandfather. We have Irish Catholic Democrats on one side of the family and Scottish Presbyterian Republicans on the other side. My dad dragged me around. He ran for the Indiana House of Representatives in 1962 and then and won. And then 64, one of those great years for Republicans. The Republicans in the House went from a 2-1 majority to a 2-1 minority, and he was one of the casualties. So that was 62 and 64, and then 67, same kind of deal. I was dragged around by my uncle Alex, who ran as a favorite in the mayoral primary, only to be upset by a 33-year-old guy that nobody's ever heard from again, named Lugar. And the other one I would mention is another one of my string of successful campaign jobs. I was among the teenagers for Lugar when he ran for Senate in 1974, and of course went down big time in flames. Although the teenagers for Lugar were outstanding, really, in that campaign.
Wasn't Mark Miles? I don't know if he was a teenager, but I know he was working on that campaign.
He was, and actually the person who kind of managed all of us was one of the main reasons we were so interested. It was actually Bert Servas's daughter, Chris, and we all thought Chris was pretty special. And she had us believing that there's no way Lugar could lose.
And it was actually a pretty close race, considering in 74, Republicans got destroyed.
Right, and that was Birch. And then 2 years later, it was Hartke, right, in 76. Yeah.
Okay.
So first 12 years of my life, I lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I guess my first political memory was when Ivan Lebemoff won for mayor of Fort Wayne. And I can't even tell you what year that was. My family wasn't really as involved in politics. Well, they weren't at all like Murray's family was, but we had lively conversations around the dinner table a lot. And so for some reason, I guess I was ill because I was the one that was most interested in politics. I do have a very vivid memory of the TV being on and watching the Watergate hearings as a young kid, and then Nixon's resignation. I remember it being a pretty big deal. So that's probably my first big political memory.
How did you start D? Like, was there somebody or some event or some person you looked up to, national or local, who said, he's a Democrat, I think he makes sense, this is what I'll do?
I think I became a Democrat in college. I wasn't, my parents weren't particularly political. And you know what they say, I went down to the People's Republic of Bloomington, and there was nothing else for me to turn into than be a Democrat.
Murray, real quick before Jim takes over, you mentioned the Scottish Presbyterian Democrat, Irish Catholic, or Scottish Presbyterian Republican, Irish Democrat, Catholic. How did you decide? Who turned you on? For me, it's always been Ronald Reagan, right? I came to age with Reagan and
well, I think my dad, my uncle, and my grandfather was a real hero of mine. He was a very interesting guy and a self-made person. Horatio Alger story, really. But he was a very conservative dude. He was a banker and real conservative. And he actually became chairman of the Democrat National Party because they'd had a quasi or semi scandal in like 1950, and they kind of threw out all the executive leadership, and so they needed a squeaky clean person, and he was kind of Truman's pal, and so that's how that worked out. But I took the Catholicism from his side, so I took some from both sides anyway.
And Buff is forever grateful for your
that's right
dedication. Jim, go ahead.
Well, I think you both have very interesting backgrounds. You've both held elected office. You've both been in leadership positions in parties, and you've both worked on a lot of campaigns. I'm interested, Kip, I think I know the answer in your case, to the question, what is the biggest highlight in your political career since you wrote a book about it? By the way, I think your book should have been called Turning Blue. But...
But you're not married to me, and my wife picked the title, so that's why it's the title it is.
A lot more Republicans would have read it if you'd made it turning blue. Was that the Obama campaign in 2008 the highlight of your career?
Yeah, that's accurate. There are a lot of highlights, but I mean, that was probably the best professional moment. And it's more than a moment. It was, as Murray would fully understand and appreciate, we had more resources for that campaign than any campaign before or since. And when you had a good idea in that campaign, if they thought it was a good idea, they'd fund it. A lot of folks have a lot of good ideas in, statewide or local campaigns, but it's a matter of having the money or the resources to do it. And almost every time that's not the case. But in this instance, we got all the money we needed from Chicago to try to put it to the finish line in Indiana, and we did.
First time a Democratic presidential candidate won in Indiana in 44 years. But besides money, you also had a candidate who came here and made 49 campaign visits, I believe.
Yes.
I'm not sure any presidential candidate, other than Barack Obama, has ever made 49 Indiana visits.
Well, as you know, I mean, part of that was just circumstantial. We had a contested primary that went on till May, and that's, that hasn't happened in Indiana very often. And because it came down to two candidates and Indiana was very critically important, both of them were here a bunch. And I think actually in the primary, Hillary Clinton was here even more than Obama was. And, because of what happened in the primary and he spent so much time here, they took a poll, I think, in midsummer and said, hey, we're within striking distance. We might as well throw some more resources at this state and see what happens. And that's exactly what they did.
And unlike with Hillary Clinton, when he met voters, it actually helped him. Murray, what was the highlight for you?
First of all, thank you for reminding me that no Democrat had won, presidential candidate had won in half a century since I was state chairman at that time, 2008. To me, it's almost the journey, really. When I was first elected to Senate, and that was a big deal, right? And when Mitch was elected governor after not having, the governor's office for all those years was really big. But just the journey, when I ran for lieutenant governor with David McIntosh in 2000, we lost a squeaker by 340,000 votes. Don't
concede, Murray.
Huh?
Don't do it. Don't concede.
It was a tremendous experience. I loved every minute of it. I would have never
every minute of it.
Darn near. I would have never had the opportunity to travel the state, to make friendships that last today. You probably feel that way, right? I mean, when you were state chairman, yeah. I mean, and working, with my dad and my uncle, and just it's a big deal. I will say, when Susan Brooks won the primary in 2012, that was really a great moment.
For Congress in the 5th Congressional District,
right.
And you were her campaign chairman,
right? And that was a beauty. That was when Dan Burton had retired, and that was a beauty contest. So 8 or 9 Republicans running for the 5th.
And she upsets whom?
Well, David McIntosh, and
who you had run on the ticket with for governor. I got to jump in and make sure we get to a story here, because I at Mike Pence's inaugural as governor, it was held outside the State House, and during that race for the House, you were chair of Susan Brooks's campaign. David McIntosh led the whole race.
The favorite.
I did an interview with him in the State House where I posed a bunch of residency questions to him the week before the election, and he got upset and turned and walked away on camera. And so a few months later, I go to Mike Pence's inaugural. I come into the State House afterwards, and I run into Ruthie McIntosh, David's wife, who comes up to me and acts friendly, shakes my hand, says it's great to see you, and says it's great to be back here in the State House since you almost ran David out of it. And
She was equally as friendly as me.
Well, I got on the elevator. Immediately got on the elevator, went down the floor, and there you were. And I said, "You'll never guess who just chewed me out." And he said, "Ruthie McIntosh." She asked me how I could sleep at night.
That's right, she did. I mean, that was that was tough. That was tough for me. But Susan and David are dear friends, and David Brooks.
Yes,
and David had not spent a whole lot of time in Indiana in the last several years. Well,
they were legitimate questions.
Yeah.
Did you ever ask an illegitimate question?
It's not the first time someone's been tripped up by one of those questions, right?
It's true. It's true. But I guess that leads me to a question. I mean, especially being state chairman, you often have to choose between friends. People look at politics as R versus D, but often there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Well, the toughest fights are the family fights, right? I mean, yeah, you do. I mean, we tried, to the extent possible, we tried to stay out of primary fights, right? And we tried to make it clear to candidates, unless they got out of line, right? I mean, and we had some of that, right? Some primary malfeasance that we made pretty clear we weren't going to put up with that, and that costs you elections, as Kip knows, right? I mean, so yeah, you do have to pick friends, and I still to this day consider Dave McIntosh a friend of mine. I like him a lot. That was just a case where I thought Susan would be great and had the opportunity to win, and
you were right.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a great candidate and did well and so forth.
I would add that the family fights tend to hurt worse and
last
longer. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I'm fighting with Republicans, they expect it. By and large. I mean, some people think that I've crossed the line over the years, but for the most part, people look at it and go, "I was doing my job," or we expect that I'm going to fight Murray Clark in the 5th district for the congressional race in the fall, and there's usually not hard feelings. But if you're going against a family member, it's a blood feud, and feelings don't come. That people don't get over it very easy.
Jim, may I ask about 2 particular races, both of which you covered? Let's start with Kip, because we were just talking about it. The Hillary Clinton faction and the Barack Obama faction in the primary, and then I want to talk to Murray. I want Murray to talk about the 96 Republican primary, Steve Goldsmith and your dear friend Rex Early. But go ahead, Kip.
Well, it's surprising on that level that there was hard feelings, really, because all of us were proxies for a national ticket, It unwound in a certain way, but Evan got out in part because he couldn't get any oxygen in Iowa. He was running for president at the same time Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were running. He couldn't get any oxygen once Obama announced, and so he thought Hillary was going to win. So he, hung his sail with her, and we were sort of the renegades, and the folks that I grew up with in politics, the Joe Hogsetts, the Evan Bayes, and the folks that I worked for, at some point weren't as happy about the fact that Obama was, really giving Hillary a run for the money. But at the top level after the primary, those folks all got over that stuff. Obviously, Barack Obama named their Secretary of State. So,
and Hillary Clinton did win the Indiana primary.
She did. That's right. Oh, Hogsett never ceases to remind me of that.
Yeah, but it's fair
underneath
to call.
There were, underneath there was some bitterness, and it persists.
It's fair to be. The point of talking about Barack Obama's presidency isn't under the purview of this podcast, but you would have to be very myopic, blind, or as hardcore partisan as you get to deny that the candidate and the campaign in 8 was both a phenomenon and phenomenal. I mean, Barack Obama's performance that year was nothing short of just like textbook.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get disagreement from me on that. That's for sure. I mean, they also, they were the first campaign because it was that time to really use the internet.
That's right.
And use it in a way that helped with organizing. They sort of took the Facebook model and put it on their campaign and really helped organically grow a grassroots network because people could communicate via the internet. I would show up to these organizing meetings. In past years when I was helping a presidential campaign or whatever, you'd know everybody in the room and you showed up. I showed up to meetings there and there wasn't anybody I'd ever met before. And it was organic, but it was also fueled by, the internet at the time. And it was a brand new tool and they figured out how to use it in a really big way.
Well, and I can tell you that having walked into a lot of campaign offices prior to that, they were always, rows of desks and very formal situations. And you'd go into the Obama, Indiana office and it was kids in their 20s sitting on the floor, sitting on desks, but everybody on a laptop. And it was very informal. And a completely different sort of animal than what you've seen before.
Well, to Kip's point, I mean, the thing that to me as a more than casual observer that was remarkable about that is how they got volunteers and did so in a way that they weren't really sure what they were getting other than a lot of volunteers. And most presidential campaigns or campaigns generally, they don't like that uncertainty, right? But they were at the beginning of the kind of social media outreach for you talk about Facebook, right? So you're never sure exactly who you're talking to, and I'm sure there was times where volunteers showed up that they wish were not there or whatever. But on the whole, they were extraordinarily successful, and they really did, lay the foundation for changing the textbook in campaigns going forward. That was my view, Kip.
Yeah, and the other thing was the talent level here in Indiana for both the primary and general was the top of the Democratic Party in the country. I mean, it was just they brought in the A team, both in the primary because they needed to win it, and then in the general, not the top, but the person that had helped out and was still advising. And one of the guys then spent 7 years in the White House, and has become a dear friend over the years, originally from Indiana. So they really had top notch, some of the smartest people I've ever been around in politics. So it was pretty extraordinary.
We should also note that Kip, did you graduate or just went to North Central with the current chief of staff for President Biden?
He's a year older. A year older and a hell of a lot smarter, but yeah, Ron Klain.
Murray, 1996.
Let me say one more thing about that was, Obama was here 49 times and McCain showed up 1.5 times.
Sarah Palin came once.
Well,
Sarah Palin did.
So McCain came for a fundraiser and he was in the Columbia Club, and I'd never met him, and I introduced myself to him, and he was, congenial, very friendly, and I said, "Hey, I feel duty bound to mention one thing to you on behalf of the state Republican committee." He said, "What's that, Mr. Chairman?" I said, "Well, have you thought about maybe some amendments to the McCain-Feingold law?" And his demeanor completely changed, and he I'm not going to tell you exactly what he said. So he didn't, and then the
answer was no, though.
And my response was, "Well, thank you, Senator. I'll report back to your thoughts of Central."
Because I know former Chairman Mike McDaniel had a conversation with him about McCain-Feingold at one point, and he stuck a finger in McDaniel's chest.
Yeah. So,
well, that trip, he actually wore I have a John McCain POW bracelet, and he wore it for that event. I ended up getting it back from him. I asked him to wear it, and he said, "I'll wear it." And he wore it, and then the Secret Service is taking him out, and I'm having to chase him down like, "No, I want it back." But clearly, was it, or in your expert opinion, Murray, did McCain just take it for granted? Because I know that the party and the campaign here was begging for resources and for for him to show up, and he just didn't.
Yeah, I mean, he was in trouble in a lot of states, right? I think so. I think he probably did. I think he felt if he had to spend a whole lot of time in Indiana, he was going to lose anyway, which is which was accurate.
Yeah, I think that was.
I was granted a one-on-one interview with him, and I was fond of telling people afterwards that I had interviewed him, but I never met him because when I walked into the room, he was talking to an aide. He didn't pay attention to me until the camera was on, and as soon as the camera was off, he turned back to this aide. So we didn't have a single social word.
Wow.
96.
Stephen Goldsmith is sitting mayor of Indianapolis, recently reelected in 95. Everyone thinks he's a slam dunk to be nominated and maybe win. Ended up being an upset, I think you could say. But I
don't think there's any doubt. I wouldn't say it wasn't an upset. I would definitely say
you think it was?
Yeah, it was definitely an upset.
Yeah. O'Bannon beating Goldsmith. Definitely. And that's come through in some of our other podcasts that they thought it was an upset. But the primary was a little like the Army-Navy game.
Well, in the context, right? It's 8 years after Evan serves 8 years, so it's 8 years since 16 years of Republican governors, right? With Bowen and Orr. So this Republicans are licking their chops, right? And Steve gets in, and Steve wasn't, he wasn't a great retail politician statewide. Let's put it that way, right? So Rex.
I've heard stories about him showing up at fundraisers and essentially asking for the check and leaving.
Sounds like McCain with you.
He was a brilliant mayor, I think, right, and a friend. But I mean, he and Rex got in, and then it was something. I mean,
has Rex Early ever said anything? This is a question to Murray and to Jim because you're both close friends. Has he ever said anything that surprised you?
Well, I'll tell you one thing he said to me once. We had, if you remember, Keith Luce, when Keith Luce was Republican chairman of the state party, and the party was broke, and it got thrown out of its offices. And ended up over there.
Those were the good old days.
The old spaghetti factory. Remember that? Yep. And so Rex becomes chairman, and they're broke, and finds out, of course, that Keith Luce has refused the personalized license plate money, which was like $400,000 to each party at the time, right? Well, Ann Delaney was smart enough to know that Keith Luce needed that $400,000 more than she did, so she went along with it. So Rex says, well, let's just start it up again. Let's just get it going again. And so he hires Brooks and me.
David
Brooks. And we take it on a contingency. Okay? And so that was the old time when you knocked out the county, change of venue, the county, if you go outside Indianapolis. So there's 2 counties left, and we have one knockout. And one is Shelby County. And we talked to our people in Shelby County, and boy, this is going to be good. I know, the by residency decision down there probably wasn't great for. So we told Rex we're going to Shelby County, and he said, "You two better be right." And so we submitted the brief. So forth. We get the report back or the order back, and we lose.
Was it Judge O'Connor?
It was Judge O'Connor. And Rex called me, and David's sitting there, and he says, I'll be careful. He says, "You two must be the 2 dumbest lawyers in the city."
And how long have you known Rex Early?
And so we just took it. But
and you've known Rex Early since you were a kid, is that?
Yeah. Well, no, he was in the legislature with Dad, right? And then he was actually, as a young guy, right, he was the campaign manager for Alex when he ran for mayor in '67. He's an old Marine. He and as
your dad
was Dad, right? And his, Pat, his son Pat, and I are very close to it. But that campaign was something. And really, one of the most interesting stories out of that campaign was that he told at the party at primary night, when he told a story about Angie. So his daughter looks like Barbara, acts like Rex, and tougher than a $3 steak, So she's got young kids. Her husband's working. She gets up in the morning, feeds the kids, goes to Rex's, the campaign headquarters, right? And gets everybody all excited and so forth, and works all day. Then at night, she goes home, feeds the kids, gives them a bath, goes back to headquarters, gets the volunteers, gets in her van, and they go around stealing Steve Goldsmith's yard sign. And
we've got 2 lawyers in the room. Statute of limitations.
Yeah, statutes run. So and then now the volunteers are asleep because it's 2 or 3 in the morning, right? And she's piling them in this van. And she goes back, drops them off, goes home, takes care of the kids, comes back. But the best part of it is the first thing she does when she comes back to her dad's headquarters in the morning is call the Goldsmith headquarters and scream at him for stealing Rex early yard stock.
Before we move on from this, Murray, were you there? Or were you there, Jim? I know you weren't there, Kip, because it's the Republican National Convention where Rex tells the national reporter, Jim,
on CNN,
is that you?
On CNN, would complain about the hotel accommodations you're talking about?
Remember when he was talking about some nefarious activities, and she said, "What's your name?" Talking to Rex, and
he said, "Steve Goldsmith."
That was not. Which one would that? Wouldn't have been.
That would have been 2000, I think.
So, to finish up, so Rex has got a lot of friends, and he had no money as state chairman, thanks to Judge O'Connor and Ann Delaney. And so the delegates, he just sold his delegate spot, right? I mean, if I'd have tried to get away with that when I was state chairman. So that's why all his buddies were in the bar at Houston. You were talking about that earlier, right?
Right.
And just holding court. I mean, that's how we made payroll.
Jim, let me thank the sponsors, and I'll turn it back over to you. You're listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. And I would be remiss not to mention the fact that Murray Clark probably never would have hired me had it not been for the intercession of one P.E. McAllister in 2006. Our guests today are former Indiana Republican Party Chairman Murray Clark and former Indiana State Democrat Party Chairman Kip Tew. Jim?
I think we need to talk a little bit about the race for governor between Joe Kernan and Mitch Daniels, since you were both involved. That was, for my money, the toughest race. It was big money on both sides and hard feelings on both sides. I think it was in terms of bare knuckle politics, it was the toughest thing I think I've seen. What about you guys? Kip, you first.
I still haven't gotten over it, if that's any indication of anything.
We should mention Kip was chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party during that election.
Yeah. A word about Joe Kernan. He's probably my political hero, and I thought would have been a fantastic governor. The state of Indiana was blessed with their decision, at least in that campaign. They were not going to get a bad governor, no matter who won. But I happen to believe that Joe Kernan he's one of the most outstanding people I've met, let alone politicians I met. And so my disappointment persists to this day because I know what kind of person he was. It was knockdown, drag out. The Republican Murray and friends of Murray, I think for a year had been doing some really good planning in figuring out where the vulnerability of our side was, and they exploited it very, very well. Mitch, of course, built a persona that worked very well. Clearly, the idea, I think it didn't come from him, from what I understand, but I actually wasn't inside it. But to take the RV and go around the state and do a half-hour TV program certainly broke the mold and gave him a persona that, of course, he didn't have before that. I mean, he was an Eli Lilly executive, and he had been at the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, and he had been, at the top of.
You think he was going to Goodwill to get those plaid shirts?
So he had done.
He's frugal enough to go to Goodwill to get.
I don't think there's any doubt he was personally cheap. I think we can. There's stories we could tell not on this podcast that would prove that part. But it was a very tough campaign. I didn't sleep. I think I had one or two panic attacks in the middle of that campaign. Just mostly because I was petrified that my hero might lose. But it was. It was a lot of tough decisions in that campaign that when you lose, you look back and go, what could we have done differently? Yeah. But fundamentally, it came down to I think that the voters kind of thought Joe Kernan wasn't as interested in the job as Mitch Daniels was, and we had been in power for 16 years, and it was a cycle that it was our turn to lose. And so we were swimming upstream for that reason first, that we had been in power for 16 years. But the second reason was Joe had decided not to run.
Right.
And then there was a bitter primary on our side between Vi Simpson and Joe Andrew. And it had gotten really bad between the factions. And then Frank O'Bannon passed away, and Joe Kernan became the governor. And out of a sense of purpose, and also I think out of a sense of obligation to the party, he said, "I'm going to go ahead and run." And it's interesting. I don't want to get too off on a tangent, but I'll never forget, we were in these focus groups, which I'm sure you've been in front of before in your times. And we didn't really talk about that component of the campaign, right? It was sort of the unspoken. How are we didn't address what was unspoken in the room, which is, why did he change his mind? And we're in these focus groups, and each one of we had several of them, and each one of them brought it up on their own and said, well, we think he did it out of obligation, but his heart's really not in it. And we never really addressed that issue in the right way and answered the question, why did you decide you're not going to run and then decide to run? And I mean, it was amazing to me that the focus group picked up on that, but we never really figured it out inside what the right answer to that was.
Kip, may I ask a question real quick before we talk to Murray about the Daniels campaign? Is it your belief, and I would agree with you if you would agree with me, if that makes sense, Kernan would have beaten any other Republican other than Daniels and Lugar? But I mean, he was popular. He had an incredible war record. He was certainly a Hoosier patriot. But the Republicans just happened to, cajole and find the one guy who put on such a great messaging campaign that it was just too much.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I believe had Joe not ever gotten out, that Mitch Daniels wouldn't have gotten in. You recall that Mitch made the decision to get in after Joe got out. And it's my belief that if Joe Kernan had stayed in that race, and you wouldn't have had Vi Simpson versus Joe Andrew, that Mitch would have never been convinced to run against him. But I don't know that to be the case. That's just my supposition.
Murray, the prevailing Republican view of that campaign looking back is very romantic. It's about RV1 and the campaign that Mitch Daniels ran. But I think a lot of people forget how tough that was. And my lasting memory from that race, I was on the panel at the final debate that was held at IU Southeast in New Albany. And I don't think I've ever been in a room that was that tense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
I'll tell you.
Yeah. First of all, Joe was my friend too, and we actually had a lot of fun in 2000. We did some debates and had fun out at the state fair, and consistent with what we said before, one reason why guys like Kip and I don't get too excited is because it's ups and downs, right? So in 2000, he's beating the hell out of me. When I'm
pointing at Kip Tew, by the way,
running against Joe for lieutenant governor, and so that's a great day for him, a great election. In 2004, not so good, and then 2008, good. You can never be too high or too low in this business. Joe Kernan had utmost respect. It was knockdown drag out. I mean, witness the fact, of course, that Mitch convinced Joe and the Chief Justice Shepard to chair that committee later on. Mitch is pretty good at politics. I remember saying to him, he's very involved in his campaign. I said to him, sometimes in my experience, when the candidate really tries to run his or her own campaign, it doesn't work out well. And he just said, okay, thank you for your opinion. I mean, he's very good. And, we were talking about the Goldsmith statewide campaign. And I mean, right, it hadn't been that long, right? It had been 8 years. And so the whole idea of the RV and the show, that was Australian Lubbers, and I'm sure Kittle wants to take credit for it. But
I always heard it was Lubbers, but maybe Lubbers takes too much credit.
Well, that could be too. But we took that ratty old RV. The first trip was to Rosie's Diner in Greene County, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? It's got hitching posts out front and so forth, and pulled in and just kind of right away ripped the air conditioner off the top of it, right? And then if you remember the primary, right, he had a primary, if you recall, against Eric Miller and his crew. And Eric Miller had the slickest RV. Did you ever see that? I mean, it was, rock star type stuff. You put them next to each other and there was no comparison. One of the reasons for romantic.
By the way, Eric Miller leads an organization called Advance America, right?
That's
Advance. Well, it's now Advance America. He's expanded, but I noticed when you were in the state senate, you had an 86% voting record with Advance America.
Is that a compliment or?
Murray, do you want me to spring back into action as your comms director? I'm happy to push back against that if you'd like.
What you're not saying is that I was like the lowest percentage in my caucus, right?
Well, we talked about textbook campaigns, 2008, Barack Obama. You'd have to be, and we have Kip here, but again, you'd have to be a pretty hardcore partisan not to at least acknowledge that Daniels's campaign for governor was pretty specifically strong.
Well, I mean, but again, it's hard to compare the two elections, right? I mean, his opponent in 2004 was, very strong. His opponent in 2008, not so much. And but the romanticism comes in that Mitch, that whole campaign and afterwards said, I've run for governor twice, and I've never had a negative campaign, right, or a negative ad or whatever. And if you remember at the end of 2004, well, you wouldn't know this, Robert, but they gave us the framed graphs of the polling. Did you ever see one of those?
No.
Yeah.
No.
And so it goes like this.
Up and down.
Up and down. Well, I could point where he had a successful,
negative comparison ad,
right? And I could point where Joe came right back and had his own, right? I mean, that was
as a way of putting a bow on this particular, and to tell you what kind of guy Murray Clark is. During my time as communications director for the Indiana Republican Party, I would wear Joe Kernan's POW bracelet to work. Murray Clark never once told me I shouldn't.
Oh, no, Joe was my buddy. So was Frank. I mean, they were president of the Senate when I was there, and my dad actually served with Frank's dad in the legislature. Yeah, they're great people.
Jim's got better
great
perspective.
Hoosiers, both of them.
Absolutely. Jim's got better perspective on this, so I'm going to try to make this a question that all three of you can answer, because Kip and I have actually had this discussion on one of our many bike rides. The assertion is politics today is worse than it ever was, and we need to get back to the old-time way of someone being someone's buddy and reaching across the aisle. I personally believe that charge is a little overheated, but Jim, Murray, Kip?
Well, what's different now is social media and the involvement of the public and surrogates. I mean, like when we point to that race between Kernan and Daniels, it was rough. I mean, there were bad things said about those candidates in paid messages. But what you didn't have then is all the social media with supporters jumping in and saying things that are even worse. I think that what's going on in Indiana and America today it is this whole discussion that takes place on social media, and it's people feel that they can say things that they would never say face to face.
Yeah, I think it is worse, but I think it ebbs and flows. It's worse than when I came in. I mean, if you look back in the history of America, it's been a lot worse than it is today, I think, in various times. But I think we're in a pretty bad moment, and I came into politics when we weren't in a very bad moment.
And that would have been about when?
I mean, my first real involvement was 1984. I was part of the Gary Hart campaign, and then was the driver for John Livengood, who was the state chair in the fall campaign of '84. I had just graduated from college. I mean, that campaign was Wayne Townsend versus Robert Orr, and the worst thing that we said about y'all was that you had a bad BMV system, which was inarguably true.
And that was a darn close election.
Yeah, that turned out to be a pretty close election.
Well, yeah, and in fact, Bob Orr got rid of the BMV system in his second term. I can tell you the Orr campaign did not run any comparative or negative ads in that race, but they had them prepared, and they were watching the polling, and it got close enough they almost pulled them out.
Well, we did our podcast on Orr, remember, Jim? And we had Mark Lubbers on, Bob Grant, Darlene Sherman, and Mark Lubbers was talking about how close that race actually was, and thought if it had gone another week, even with Reagan winning 49 states nationally. Murray, old time versus now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the social media part of it has changed everything. I mean, we live in a world where, more and more people are in a bubble, and they just won't accept that there's a reasonable alternative position. Right. And so it seems to me we've lost a sense of a common good, being the utmost thing we want to accomplish. I'm myopic enough just to think Indiana isn't as bad as most places, or even, certainly D.C.
You're not on Facebook, are you?
Actually, I'm not.
I don't know if you were done. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But I think it's more than social media. I do, and this may come off partisan, but it's not intended to be. I think when the FCC got rid of the fairness doctrine, and you had the rise of conservative radio, and then Fox News, I think it changed everything. When I was growing up, even though conservatives complained about the Washington Post and complained about the New York Times and complained about the TV stations, all of America tuned in, and they realized that, Jim's profession were the referees. We don't have referees anymore. And I believe not having a referee makes it coarser and harder. People refuse to believe facts. And because there's no agreed upon facts, and there's been arguments about those certainly over the years, but there was a baseline, I think, that you could turn to, and there was a place where where anti-vaxxers wouldn't get oxygen, but now they get oxygen. I mean, it was the number one story on Facebook for 2 months, and it was incorrect information, and that just didn't happen many years ago when you had a referee.
Well, Murray and I will resist the temptation to push back as Republicans for that. Clearly things have changed, but you read about some of the campaigns, even in the last 50 years, the 20th century, how rough and tumble they were. I mean, the Kennedys recruiting Franklin Roosevelt Jr. to go to West Virginia during the primary to accuse Hubert Humphrey of being a draft dodger. That's about as bare knuckle as it gets. But I want to go on to that, to append to that, because Kip, and what you do for a living, you got a lot of friends on the other side of the aisle. Hopefully you include me as one of them. Yep. Murray, your reputation as being someone who you can work with is just about perfect. I wrote a speech for Murray one time when he was state chair and I was his comms guy, and he was giving a speech up in Lake County. He was invited by Earlene Rogers, who was a Democrat, served for a long time in the state house. And the first line I wrote was, "Now, Senator Rogers, I can be really, really mean to you or really, really nice to you, whichever serves you better." You remember that?
Well, and, Earlene Rogers, what I've learned from people like Earlene Rogers or Teresa Lubbers or Susan Brooks or, some of my really good friends is you become effective and a better leader when you stop and listen to the life experiences of somebody who may not agree with you all the time. Earlene really taught me that, right? She would come back to my desk and say, "Now, why'd you vote that way?" And I said, "Well, here's why I did." And I said, "Why'd you vote?" And she'd explain it, right? I mean, that's how you become effective. I just don't think there's people are taking the time to learn, about the makeup of the people across the aisle or with whom they disagree. And to Susan Brooks, great credit. She understood that. She really tried to reach out and learn about life experiences of people on the other side. I just don't think people don't have time to deal with it. They're not reaching out. Maybe more in the state house. Kip, you're there more than I am, but
it's actually gotten worse. You used to be able to take legislators from differing parties out and play poker and or go to dinner and argue, but you had a basis for respect for each other. It's harder to get guys to go out together these days.
And does the modern climate make it harder to just be reasonable? Like, I've always thought that one of the reasons that Murray is so respected is he's seen as reasonable. I don't flack for him anymore. He's not my boss, but one of the reasons I wanted to work at State Party was to work, besides the fact that Jennifer Hollowell hired me for a gig I had no business getting. But I wanted to work for Murray because he was so well respected, because he was seen as reasonable. Kip, you run into John Day, Andy Jacobs, other folks who have seen as like, let's have a discussion, be reasonable. Is that kind of gone?
Not behind the scenes so much. It's like Murray said, if you can sit down and talk with somebody and you can disagree, but not be disagreeable, some of that's still there. But you do have we've always had some guys on the edges at the legislature. You served with a few of them. There seems to be more of them on the edge, but there's still reasonable people in charge. I mean, I think the governor's reasonable. I think Rod Bray's reasonable. I think Todd Houston are reasonable people.
I agree. I was going to mention that. I think the leaders of the four caucuses are reasonable people. I get that sense.
Yeah.
Jim, you have a couple more questions before we get to the 5 questions?
Well, sure. Kip, you served in the city county council. You've run for other offices. You ran for one, didn't you?
City council. And lost.
After you had already served.
And who took you to lunch the next day?
My boy, Robert Vane. Go ahead and ask the question.
Well, my point is, with all this discussion about being in party leadership and working on campaigns, why would you want to be in office?
I always wanted to be in office from before I was a party leader, because I wanted to make a difference. And people did ask me, well, you've been the state chair, you ran Obama's campaign, you've been involved at a high level. Why would you want to run for city council? And I really loved that job. I enjoyed the heck out of it. People look at me like I'm crazy, but you could help people. This is a really dumb example, but we had a pothole as you round the curve on Westfield that was really deep one day, and somebody called me and said, "Hey, I almost hit somebody head on avoiding that pothole. Can you help?" And so I called DPW, even though it was Ballard administration, and said, "Hey, this is dangerous." And they had it filled within a couple hours. And that's a very small example, but you may have saved somebody's life that day. It's fulfilling on probably the same reason Murray got involved in politics originally. You're trying to make the world a better place. And at the local level, you really can help. Some of the folks that are senators in the United States Senate, they prefer to be pontificators, which has its place, no doubt about it. But I enjoyed being on the council. I was upset when I lost because I wanted to continue to do that, and I had a view on how I thought the city ought to be run and how my district could be improved and those type of things, and so I really enjoyed it. I also unlike most people that have been chairs, I enjoyed the hell out of being a county and a state chair. I mean, not like Murray saying he loved every minute of it. I didn't love every minute of it. There.
I liked every minute of running for lieutenant governor. I didn't say I loved every minute of being state chair.
No. I mean, I did not, and I can say I didn't enjoy every minute of being the state chair or the county chair, but I loved the job, both of them.
Yeah. Why did you serve in office?
Well, when I was growing up, the running for office was considered, a community service, right? Public service. It was, in our family, it meant something. Now, all too often, it's described in a derisive way, right? Politics, and so forth. And I mean, I just observed, the people around me and why they did it and why they gave up their time and what it meant. So I kind of started young but my siblings were smart enough not to get embedded in it. Yeah. I mean, I loved being in the Senate, and, the president pro tem at the time and I didn't get along great.
Bob Garton.
I actually like him as a person. He did not like Rex at all, and the feeling was mutual, right? So I got painted with the sins of my friend.
Rex got behind a primary candidate who took him out of the state Senate.
Is that why I didn't do anything to help Senator Garton in 2006 when I was working for you?
Well, no, I don't remember that. No, but I
Takes
mean,
offense at that.
But
after the primary,
Governor Daniels asked me to, become state chair. I'd never considered it or even thought it was a great idea, but I didn't. I don't take instructions very well, and I figured as long as Garton was going to be president pro tem, right, I'd be a back seater, and then he gets beat in the primary. Good timing on my part. But. I loved the Senate. I loved the way, people paint the law making process as being all insider and not well thought out and all that. That wasn't my experience there, right? I mean, the process makes sense. And if it's meaningful, you have to really go, tough legislation takes a couple of years usually. And I loved the process, and I loved the way it ended, right? I loved the way you had, no matter you going through the whole process, but you better have your stuff together when you get to the end. So, yeah, it was a great experience. I loved it.
One thing that it's come to light when you talk to executives, people at the highest level, one of the things that they enjoy talking about the most, if you guys could answer relatively quickly, is their staff. Murray, I obviously know more about this than I do with Kip's staff.
Most of our staff.
How proud, both of you? Proud are you?
Yeah, I mean, they are. We did well because our staff was great. I mean, Jennifer was really an extraordinary executive director, followed by Kevin Ober, who was fantastic. Different personalities, different approaches, but we had young people, some of whom learned at the feet of Kittle, which we had to take care of. Marty and all that. I am really proud of them.
Chris Jensen, who's now the mayor of Noblesville, was your staff.
I mean, Leah McGrath. I could go on and on. Mindy Colbert, just really wonderful people.
Jeff Coates served on the city county council.
They've been right. They're high achieving people, but more so than that, they're really wonderful people. And as you know, and to be a staffer, right, this isn't a 9-to-5 job. Yeah. You had to, this wasn't for everybody, and you had to explain it. So these were all not just committed, good people, high achievers, but really hardworking.
I got a call every once in a while late at night. Vane, Murray, interviewing with Shella tomorrow. What's my message? Can you give me an hour and I'll call you back? That happened quite a bit. But the staff is what you say. The list goes on and on. Kip, the people you worked with?
Well, my best friends to this day are people that I worked on campaigns with. We still hang out. We still have a good time together. They're some of the best people I've ever known because most of them were in this business for the same reason. They wanted to make the world a better place. And that goes across parties, right? I mean, I get along with you because you got into it. We don't agree on hardly anything, but we go on bike rides together and argue and have fun. And it's because most of the people that are involved in this process over the years are doing it because they wanted to help people, and they got into it for that reason. So it's pretty easy to be friends with folks like that, I think. And when I was a state chair, Molly Cheevers was my fundraiser, and she went on to great fame and fortune here in Indianapolis. Has done a fantastic job.
Awesome.
The township. For Lawrence Township Constable Terry Burns was my press secretary back when I was state party chair. Dan Parker, who's the head of DPW, of course, went on to be the state chair, was my executive director. Joe Larry, whose offices we sit in right now, Joe Larry Smith was my political director. So all folks that are, have had great careers further on when I was state chair, and they've, it's been a joy to be around this business my whole career.
Before we get to the 5 questions, do you want to re-answer the 5 questions, Jim? It's been 2 years since we asked them to you.
Sure,
you could have changed your answers.
I'll do better this time.
But one of the first questions I had to ask, which I completely skipped over, forgive me, is when did the two of you, Murray and Kip, first meet?
I don't recall it.
Well, in 2000, he was really helping Joe Kernan, and so we had 3 debates scheduled. The first one was at the state fair. And, Kernan and Clark, a couple of city boys, so everybody's nervous about what we might say, right? And so we get done and we shake hands, and they're, oh my God, they didn't screw up, right? So then we had a debate in Richmond in an economic front of an economic development group, right? It was a home game for Joe, but we had a lot of fun there. I don't know if you remember that one. And so we're getting ready to have a third one. And somebody from our campaign comes in and says, that Kip Tew, he's being unreasonable negotiating the terms of this debate. I said, there are going to be 12 people that care about this debate. Tell Kip Tew we're out. And we did. We just that's my first experience with Kip.
We have reached the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast for our 5 questions, and Jim's going to re-engage. You ready?
Sure.
Jim, you did not get this question because originally the first question of the 5 questions was, what was your first car? Which I've now changed to, what was your first job?
Well, my first job was working for my father, who owned a power company that was founded by my grandfather. He served 2 small towns and 20 farms in between in southern Minnesota. And all through high school and college, I did a number of jobs there, everything from running a jackhammer to pushing pipe under streets. And
wow.
Yeah.
Murray?
First real job where I actually got paid, I worked for a pharmaceutical wholesaler by the name of Rush and Hibble, and their warehouse was at 10th and Central. Now it's gentrified, right? But and I made big money. I was 14 or 15. I made minimum wage, but if I poured muriatic acid, I got a penny a gallon more. Until the FDA saw it and they said you have to be 18, and that came to them.
Kip?
I delivered the newspaper as a newspaper boy for the Bloomington Herald Times.
Herald Telephone.
It was a telephone back then. That's right. Yeah, that was when I was 7th grade.
Kip, what was your first concert?
Without my parents, it was the Doobie Brothers and Eddie Money. I think 1978, Market Square Arena, still one of the greatest concerts of all time.
Pretty darn good. Murray?
I saw Elton John in Arizona as a kid, first time.
That's pretty darn good.
I saw a triple bill at the Sioux Falls Arena. Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, 3 Dog Night, and the Beach Boys.
Wow.
That's my favorite question of the 5 questions because you just never know. I still say, I've said this on several podcasts, Greg Ballard's first concert being Sly and the Family Stone in Bloomington is a scene that I just can't quite picture. Jim, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you choose?
All the President's Men. As I told you the first time, I'm not a huge reader. There aren't very many books I've read more than once. I think I've read All the President's Men 3 times. And any lesson you want to learn about journalism is in there somewhere.
Well, I love Seabiscuit. I love sports, historical books. Seabiscuit's wonderful. I've read a lot of the Halverson's baseball books and all that. But the books about LBJ, Master of the Senate, and the one before that, which I forget the name of, was just, Pathway to Power. They are remarkable books.
Robert Caro books, is that right?
Yeah.
Kip? You can say Journey to Blue.
No. I'd lose all credibility. I'm going to go fiction. Obviously, I'm on the Vonnegut Museum board, and so I think everybody in Indiana and across the world needs to read Slaughterhouse-Five. People would look at it and not think that it's a political book, but it is, and it is a lesson in life, and it's a fantastic way to start if you're starting your reading journey.
And I've mentioned this to you before. I'd love to do a podcast on Kurt Vonnegut, including you and anyone else you so choose. Kip, if you could witness any event in history, be there as it happens, which event would you choose?
Wow. Would I be in a hermetically sealed, safe environment? It'd probably be storming the beaches at Normandy. When the United States saved the world from Nazis.
I think that mine's the same thing. We did the trip to
it's unbelievable.
Normandy right after the president was there celebrating the 75th anniversary at the cemetery and all that. It was really compelling. I think my answer would be the same.
Jim?
I'm going to delve into my family history again. My grandfather was an electrician who saved up his money and got off a train in the first town that didn't have electricity, and he built a small coal generator. And I wish I could have been there when the lights came on for the first time.
That's a good answer. Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record, talk about anything you want, whom would you choose? Jim?
Boy, I missed this one the last time, and everybody says George Bush or Barack Obama. I think I'd like to talk to somebody who's been in a role like these guys, more behind the scenes. Somebody like David Axelrod.
Murray?
Wow. Well, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, George Bush, I was a Bush guy. I'm one of those rotten George, Bush family people. And
George Bush, H.W. or George W.?
Well, I mean, it'd have to be George W., right?
Mm-hmm.
But I played college baseball with his cousin, who's he's very close with, and probably him. And his wife, who I have great respect for.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I'm going over about 15 names in my head, so having to pick.
No one has picked Ed Tracy yet.
Yeah, I've spent 2 hours with Ed Tracy, and I'd like to spend more, but I think I can do that. So that's not the issue. Shella made me think about David Plouffe, who I think was one of the most brilliant campaign people in America. He would be on the list. I would like to have 2 hours alone with Obama just to talk about that 2008 campaign again. But there's sports figures I'd love to sit down with. There's musicians I'd love to sit down with. Springsteen come top of the list, Jackson Brown. There's so many people. So many people, but I love the question, but I don't have I don't have a number one, I don't think.
One of the things we try to do on the Leaders and Legends podcast is to bring people who are friends, but maybe have opposed each other in a friendly way from time to time. The podcast itself is designed to be informative, entertaining, and comfortable. And I think we did that today. And we did it with our other ones, with Ed Tracy and Jim Kittle, Michael Connor, Paul Okeson, Robin Winston and Mike McDaniel, John Mutz and Louis Mahern. It's a lot of fun. And you have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, a local veteran public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and McAllister Machinery, your friendly neighborhood Caterpillar dealer. Our guests today have been former Indiana Democratic Party Chairman Kip Tew, former Indiana Republican Party Chairman Murray Clark, and our good friend and frequent co-host Jim Shella. Thanks to all of you for joining us. It was a lot of fun, just like I thought it would be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.